Good morning, everyone. My name is 𝗂𝗍𝗂𝗏. I'm the Technical Director of UIRR. I will be the moderator of today's webinar on TSI Telematics. You have already 77 attendees. Welcome to the UIRR webinar on TSI Telematics, and the topic is data sharing needs and the opportunities for combined transport in the light of this regulation. We have tried to have a challenging agenda. So we have one speaker on the introduction on digitalization, what has been done in the last decade in intermodal transport. This will be performed by Mr. Schultze, so the Director General of UIRR. And there will be then another presentation from our friends of ECTA, so the Chemical Transport Association. So Mr. Devos will have the customer view, how important the data exchange is for intermodal transport. Then we will have our consultant, so Dr. Roland Klüber from the company Consilis, that will have the pleasure, I think, to present you a bit our impact assessment for the terminals in particular on the different measures that have been taken or proposed by the Commission on the TSI Telematics. Then we will have Mr. Van den Bemden from the company Alpega to explain how important is also to integrate the rail-related data into the supply chain. And we will have, after the policy aspect, so Mr. Yann Seimandi from the Commission, the policy officer and responsible for the TSI Telematics. He will present the main impacts on the data sharing, changing and purpose. And then after all this general consideration, we will have then statements from different players. So there will be players from the Port of Rotterdam. There will be one person, so Mr. 𝗍𝗶𝗄𝗏 from the Port Authority of Hamburg, will also making a statement as Port Authority, but also as a platform provider. And then for the intermodal community, we will have Mr. 𝗶𝗄𝗏𝗶𝗃𝗍 from the company 𝗥𝗍𝗂𝗍𝗍 that will present the needs of a platform provider such as 𝗥𝗍𝗂𝗍. And then we will invite all the speakers, I think, to be in a roundtable to discuss what are the changes that are needed to improve the railroad ecosystem. In this roundtable, also there will be then the company Trimble, represented by Mr. 𝗬𝗁𝗂𝗁𝗂. And then I will also then conclude, I think, the webinar. The meeting is recorded, unless there are some audience that would like not to be recorded. The second aspect is about the questions. So please use the chat room that we have opened for everyone. So my colleagues that will attend, so that will be Remy and Mateusz, will take care about the questions. We will collect all of them for the roundtable, so we will address them and we consolidate all these questions, I think, directly then to the different speakers. I will now invite the first speaker, so Mr. Schultze, the Director General of UIRR, to introduce a bit the topic on digitalization and data sharing. What did we do in the last decade in terms of policy and activities? So Charlie.
Show the slide, please.
Yes, and let me know. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
This is your part.
Yeah. I forgot to say that the objective today is to improve the situation together. So it's important, I think, that's why we have different speakers, because we need to cover, in terms of digitalization, data sharing, the full door-to-door perspective, so the end-to-end perspective. So from the shippers, the consignees, the LSPs, we need the CTOs, we need the terminal operators, and of course the IMs and the rail undertaking. But don't forget, I think, in this ecosystem, the IT platform providers. So you have here today also the statements of the Port of Rotterdam and Hamburg. How can be those integrator be also then involved in the data flow, because that's just facilitating the data between the different stakeholders, that they have also a need to access those data, We have the policy aspects with the DG Move and the European Commission. And we have also then a coordination activity with the different associations. So we have here at least 2 of them, UIRR and ECTA. We have also invited a joint sector group. So that's the group where all the associations are dealing with different topics. One of the topics is, of course, digitalization. Unfortunately, they couldn't attend today's meeting. Let's hope that in the next event that we will organize, they will also be present. Yeah. Okay, now the floor is yours, Charlie.
Next slide, please.
Yes.
Next. Yes, this is our galaxy. Welcome to all of you. Good morning. This is the 100+ stars and starlets dealing with combined transport today. This is our community. We, as UIRR, we are representing the operators of combined transport and the terminal managers, but we managed to have a network of partners and also a network of MOU peers with us, which means that we have a connection to the member states, which is extremely important. And of course, our customers are the European institutions, and we have a good contact to all the other peers in Brussels. Next slide. Why is it important to take a look back? UIRR is completing its 55th anniversary this year. So we have the impression we are still a startup with 55 years, but digitalization is really becoming one of the main topics. And our expectations to the policy, we made it clear that digitalization will be important, but we made this clear already some 13 years ago. And in 2012, there was an ERA working party on the tough TSI, and we introduced something apparently new, which was the user, or better, the customer. So who is the customer and who must provide what to whom? This, in terms of digitalization, is really the most important part. And all the actors that I mentioned here should be somehow involved in the tough TSI, for example, the consignment node. And the most important, what really introduces also the meeting of today, is that all above mentioned actors should have an access to the tough TSI information when involved in a train. I think this is very, very important, and this leads me to the next slide. In 2016, we had a sector statement, and the sector statement was part of a real effort to boost international rail freight. You see the associations involved in this effort, and the most important thing here was to integrate all the stakeholders of the logistics chain, and also to look for an estimated time of arrival available for all the stakeholders involved. So the customers, the freight forwarders, the shippers, they have to be provided with the up-to-date information about the status of their freight and an estimated time of arrival. And this was some 9 years ago quite new. So we called this, next slide, the roadmap for effective digital transformation on the side of UIRR. So this is what we did on our side in order to boost digitalization. We wanted more transparency. We wanted a data exchange, and the CT sector's vision was always to transform itself from a road rail freight transport service provider to an integrated collaborative transport service provider for the entire logistics supply chain. Next slide, please. In 2016 and then in 2019, we talked about the so-called Rotterdam clause, and together with RNE, we made a change request on the tough TSI. And from this point, I think we made it very clear that we have to work closely together with all the stakeholders, including the infrastructure managers, the railway undertakings, the terminals, the wagon keepers, the operators of combined transport, the LSPs, and of course, the shippers, because they all belong to the same chain. And the original proposal said all stakeholders involved in the same transport are entitled to share the data from all other stakeholders involved in the same transport under the condition that they are identified. So this was the agreement. This was the basis. We wanted to simplify it. We wanted to be more transparent. And for me, what is important is that we don't need any public open data where everybody has everything, but we really need something which is focused, something is that is shared, so that really the data that somebody needs in his own context are available. Next slide. So as we said, the data sharing should be the rule by default. And the newest point here, May 2025, is a position paper that we published last week on TSI Telematics, where we made very clear that TSI Telematics must fully embrace the spirit of the Rotterdam Clause, and we are in alignment with most of the other associations and mainly also RNE. Improved data sharing is free from administrative, commercial, unfair, and biased restrictions, and selective open data sharing is a selected solution to facilitate digital information flow between the stakeholders. This is our last paper. We published it last week, and we hope that the Commission, which is new proposal, and also the other associations will follow this direction. This is from my side. Back to you, Eric.
So thanks, Charlie, I think for this rapid, I think, overview of the last decade activities of UIRR. So personally, I have been involved now more than 15 years in the drafting of the different, I think, TSI recommendation with the aim really, I think, to integrate much more, I think, the intermodal stakeholders into the tough TSI flow. So that's really our main aim. And you have here the Rotterdam clause, so we will come back to that several times. And also then the question about data sharing, if this is publicly available, if this is open data. Here we have also to make a choice into the sector, and if this is going in the right direction, if we make the data completely open to everyone, or we have to be more selective and to send only the data to the right people at the right time. Now, the tough TSI is normally addressing the infrastructure managers and the rail undertakings. But for intermodal transport, we have a series of customers that are behind the terminals, behind the intermodal operators. So one of them is today there. So that's the association ECTA. So I will now leave Peter Devos as Director General of ECTA, I think, to present a bit the views of the customers. I will then open the presentation and then I will share it. Sorry, I'm just looking. Yes, it's here. Sorry. Yes. Peter, let me know when you want to move from one slide to the other. Yep. Good morning, Peter. Yep.
Yeah, well, first, good morning to everybody. I hope the sound is all right. So just do a quick sound check. Yeah, excellent. Perfect, yep. So my name is Peter Devos. So I'm the ECTA and ECLIC Managing Director, representing, I would say here indeed, let's say kind of shippers and logistics service provider activity. So I appreciate you take the time to listen how we can collaborate and communicate together. So the first thing, maybe next slide, Eric, I will indeed guide you through the slide. So I think who is ECTA and why is digital collaboration so important? So ECTA is also a non-profit association. We represent a community of 120 members, mainly transport companies. I think all the transport companies that are arriving at your terminals, bulk and packed. I would say 50% of these transport companies or carriers are active in intermodal freight. So about half of them. The focus of ECTA is growing and has been originally focused on responsible care, safety and sustainability, including also CO2 emission reduction and all safety best practices. But over time, and I think definitely we started in 2019 to talk about digitalization as a separate pillar, yeah, and where we really understood that the future is digital in terms of communication, and that we need to create standards, yeah, that we need to be able to speak the same language and start changing data. A bit similar to, I would say, the Rotterdam TSI, I would say, regulations that come there. So we feel also from a shipper and from logistic service provider the same needs. And so back in 2018, also ECTA co-founded 𝗥𝗍𝗃, yeah, together with shippers and even 𝗥𝗱𝗀𝗃, the cleaning station. And I come to that and I will just reference it because it's another example of digital collaboration. So that's a bit where we are, and I'm very happy here to also close the loops with the rail freight stakeholders and to see how we can improve it. So next slide, Erik. So we talk about collaboration, we talk about communication, and I think we found that very evident because we do that already for more than 10,000 years as human beings. But what has changed over the last 40 years is really a revolution, yeah, and this is the technical revolution. The means of communicating has changed drastically. However, in some of our minds, yeah, and even I started in '90 at the chemical industry. I also grew up as, let's say, a person distributing papers. Yeah, and now we need to move from papers to data sets. And that's really a clear mind shift. Yeah, and so that's where I would say, if we want to improve and be more competitive, so Erik, if you move forward, so just click on it. So communication seems to be simple. So you have a sender and a receiver. So here I'm playing the role of the receiver, of the customer. And suppose we do that with two parties sending, at home, you do that, and you see if you have kids at home and pubers and maybe a wife, that communication sounds simple, but there are a lot of misunderstandings. And so what is important, that there should be in that communication flow interoperability. You need to understand each other. But also you need to trust each other for a common outcome. And these two pillars are very important when we then translate that into a flow chart, call it an intermodal freight context with multiple parties. So the difficulty now is that you suddenly have multiple parties with senders and receivers, all with different expectations, and you need to create alignment. And then also, because we use systems, and these systems are obsolete after 5 years, because every other 5 years there is another technology coming, I think we have not only different systems, also different handoff points. It is not so easy. So we get to a fragmented landscape architecturally, and we have quite a challenge of not uniform standard data transmissions across our stakeholders. So, Erik, if you move to the next slide, I think people will recognize the picture where we come to saying, well, yeah, what is now, we talk about modern communications, real time. The tools are there. Technology is not a problem because the technology is the enabler, but we need to indeed create that communication channel, making sure that we can talk the same language. And if you press once more, Erik, you will see that we need to create an end-to-end communication workflow. And I think this webinar is here already unique to bring, let's say, the customer view into, let's say, the rail freight stakeholder view, and saying, how can we set up an end-to-end communication workflow between the different sender receivers and introduce data standards? And these data standards are needed to speak the same language, yeah, because they are a kind of prerequisite for all intermodal actors to understand each other, but also to keep control of the data and to keep control of their own decisions. I think for me that's as important. So what we have been doing in ECTA since 2019 is we have created for several B2B workflows, we have created, we call it best practice guidelines, we call it digital data standards, And I think we have digital data standards around supply chain visibility, around equipment, around truck and truck driver data. And the real thing is, well, do we agree to share data? What data do we share? What data do we share for what purpose? Yeah, and do we do that also across the chain? So I think Mr. Schultze talked about the consignment note. We looked in ECTA also at the tank cleaning document, because that was a document created by associations, a paper document standard in 2005. And we said, yeah, we need to have a digital standard. So we made that B2B document paperless, yeah, within tank cleaning, yeah. And so that's the 𝗥𝗄𝗀 cleaning document that you see there. And we did that also through a digital platform where we, yeah, let's say, set up rules on how to deal with data. And I think that brings a bit me to the next topic. So if you look at, yeah, just press the button. Yeah. So if you look at the stakeholders again here, the shipper and LSPs versus the rail freight stakeholders, what are the main requirements if we look at an end-to-end flow? Yeah, so we include what shippers and LSPs are requiring. And I think here I took an example, and I think this is from a survey from Alice from 2022, and you see the requirements of the shipper and the requirements of the LSPs, what they require from rail freight operators, yeah, and so from the community. And mainly indeed, and it was mentioned, it's about the visibility aspect. So it's about the expected time of arrival, the expected time of pickup at terminals, but also reliability, data quality, uniform measurements. And yeah, we try also to have more responsiveness. So if you look at where are the perception gaps, well, and so they are in fact combined these requirements into perception gaps. The real, I would say, takeaway from this is indeed that the end customer sees major shortcomings, but the perception on the railway operators is not always there. So if you click once more, Eric, you will see the build there. So my takeaway here is that even once you make that end-to-end flow, that the end customer sees the major shortcomings, while the rail sector might not share that perception. They said, no, for us it's okay. Yeah, we don't share that. So the question is then, how do you solve this puzzle? Yeah, because it's, as I said, it's a communication. It's a relation. It's a communication between sender and receivers. So go to the next slide, Eric, and here you will understand while ECTA also took the decision of creating standards. So what we have done now together with UIRR, 𝗏𝗏, and ECTA, and I think that's a new initiative that we started at the beginning of this year, is also to standardize the digital processes across the stakeholders in an intermodal chain. And the objectives are the same. So the objectives is indeed creating that visibility, reduce the complexity, simplify administration. And I think the plan is to create together with 𝗏𝗏 and UIRR and ECTA 3 intermodal digitalization guidelines, call it best practice guidelines, and they will be there, let's say, and together. So I think this is a learning curve, but it's putting the foundation in place for collaborations, let's say, across an end-to-end chain. So maybe, Eric, if you move to the next slide. So what is required? Yeah, and that's my last slide here, to streamline the business communications between the actors. Well, we talked about interoperability and standardized data sets. So we need to think different. the cleaning document as an example. Eats with that cleaning document. These data in a control by ship share it for the purpose of sharing data. And we need to be compliant with regulations, but most changes definitely also the mindset. The communication. We have 2 legs and 2. I think our 2 years. But we are still. They are not the driver. They should not own these data. They are just enablers to do the communication. Some of them now are talking, and yeah, there is a risk of these platforms overtaking, I would say, the business, but we should not let that happen. Yeah, so that's why I said, no, we should have clear data governance rules. We should have, let's say, rules to control these platforms. I think it's the business should own the data, not these platforms. So we should not fool ourselves. So I'm very, let's say, yeah, important on that is having respect for data. But on the other hand, that's not an excuse of not doing it. So we need to learn as we go, and yeah, let's say it's really the proof is in the doing. Yeah, so you need to do it. Start small, starting with the standards, and yeah, do that together. So that's what I have, Erik. I think the next is just a thank you for the opportunity to explain.
Coming back to one slide, it's maybe here what you put very clear. I think the perception gaps, that's a very important, I think, aspects to consider, because we as UIR, we are just in the middle. We are the combined transport operator, so we are just in the middle of the logistic and the road world with and the railway world. And this is a message that we repeat very often, I think, to say that pay attention. I think that what you are maybe developing is maybe not something that is meeting the requirements of our customers, and that's why you have this perception gap. I remember to have participated to this new proposal of the Commission with the TSI Telematics. How can we cover this gap? Because TSI is a standard, is a message format, is also a way to communicate, but how far can we go? And one of the question is to say, if we have to put all this data publicly available, that's a big question, I think, because that makes, of course, life easier for everyone. But you, as you mentioned, as a customer, you make it very clear, I think, that you need all the data. And that's also something very important, because for UIR, we are fighting for years to say that we need, I think, to define per stakeholders, I think, what are really the need in terms of data. I will take one example, train running information. That's very interesting to get, maybe as an operator, but you as a customer, you don't need to have all the different visibility points, so to have exactly where the train is, at which time he will arrive to the next station. That's irrelevant information for you, because what you want is ETA or ETP visibility and nothing else. So here we have only to exchange data when it's relevant, and meaning that to have to the right actor and at the right time. And we will come back to that a bit later. On the agenda now, and thanks for intervention. I don't see for the moment. Okay, there are some questions and remark, but this will come back, I think, to the round table, so we will note down. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. I'm coming back to the presentation. So next speaker, we have Dr. Roland Klüber, so CEO of Consilis. He represents UIR. I think since the beginning of digital activities at UIRR. We have been working with Consilis. You have seen the roadmap that we have developed in 2019. So he was one of the initiators. And also, I think we had a lot of discussion internally with our member companies, how digitalization can be an added value for our sector, and how also an organization like UIRR could be then somehow involved in the digitalization. Here we have one example. With the TSI Telematics, we are doing a lot of activities, but one of them is also to see the impact of the proposed measures by the Commission. And we have initiated some weeks ago a kind of light impact assessment. And here Dr. Klüber will then present, I think, then the result of this impact assessment. Yeah. And I will open the slide. Sorry, I have to move it there. Yes, so Roland, floor is yours, and tell me when you have to move from one slide to the other.
Yes, many thanks, Eric, and good morning, the audience. As Eric has said, we had the pleasure as Consilis to assess the feasibility and estimate the impact assessment of the TSI Telematics. And we will give you some highlights on it and also some connections to what Peter has said prior to this presentation. So maybe next slide, Eric, because we see that data sharing is a very pressing topic, and it is highly pressing because the Rotterdam clause is already there, and we've seen that it hasn't developed as some might want it to have been developed so far. So what it took here is very similar to what Peter did. So one of the many surveys here from Hermes on answering the question, do cooperation and data sharing increase the supply chain efficiency? And you see the answer is 2/3 say yes, it does. And what are the benefits? We had better regulatory compliance, increased service delivery, increased customer satisfaction, faster disruption response, reduced cost of fulfillment, and with the data we can also optimize the supply chain. So that's very much in line what we've heard before, and as I said, there are many of these studies all pointing into the direction. Data sharing does help, but it must be understandable on both sides, on all sides, and that is the challenge. Eric, maybe in the next slide, please. So what we're trying to avoid is, since we see that in the rail sector we have some hurdles in terms of data sharing, so we're not there. We have some missing data. We have some lack of transparency, some timeliness and completeness issues, and that might, in a worst case scenario or in potential forecast of what happens today, is that customers are lost or less customers can be won if the rail sector is not agreeing, and meaning RUs and IMs, to better address combined transport needs. Reasons. Next slide, please. Visibility is there. You can see, you can easily the train, and the monitoring have or on passenger flights, cargo flights. It's not a problem. Or a plane is what is on those ships, and that's exactly the needs to be public and what needs to be private. We'll get to that. That was only there in other. It's not so easy for us to have that visibility. Next one, please. But as a sector, and also for the feedback from the impact assessment, TSI Telematics, especially the data sharing between involved parties, meaning not only the rail CTOs and also the freight that intermodal transport and terminals are recognized, and also very positively enhanced from this target to have a interface that is usable by everybody, and freight terminals operated are in the design of the data for the future. Next slide, please. So to the impact assessment, we decided to make it more concrete. So really ask members specifically on the TSI Telematics and what they believe that impact will have on them. So we looked not only on the cost side, but also more on the encompassing what's the impact on the business model, what impact is on the other parties of the supply chain. Does it have impact on their employees? Does it have impact on the corporate social responsibility aspects? Does it have impact on the environmental aspects? If we store too much data, then it might have, yes, also impact on the environment. And in order to make it quick and digestible, we decided to start with the members from the 𝗥𝗿𝗵𝗵𝗁 project, which was a project that ended in February, was EU funded to foster interoperability and data exchange with terminals. So we had a kind of a good start with those, but we also included 3 non-𝗥𝗿𝗵𝗵 terminals to get a more balanced view. And we said, okay, we had 2 versions of the regulation, and we started when we started it, the version 7 was out. So there the request was that quite a lot of data needs to be exchanged also with terminals. So that's more scenario 8. Everything that should be exchanged, and we had a more scenario with only 4 the train running information and the train forecast information, plus interruptions and delay messages. So this is more the scenario B, which is more fit for purpose from what we received from the from the 𝗥𝗿𝗵𝗵 project, but also from the interviewees that were not part of the 𝗥𝗿𝗵𝗵 project. Next slide, please. So what we did is we really went through that and also started with the short introduction, what TSI Telematics is about and what major changes it might have for terminals. And then with the terminal representatives, to what does it the processes, from these processes, roughly envision and that impact the functionality, and also does it impact interfaces. And we also asked what's the long-term impact. So long-term, we took 5 years. What does it have resources and money to run it for 5 years? And we interviewed the 8 terminals, and we classified them into categories of sizes and volumes. And then we roughly extrapolated to 1,200 European freight terminals, which is not a perfectly statistical basis. We know that gives an indication where issues. If we would exchange all messages, it is quite an investment for the billions. On the 4 messages with a little bias instead of getting partners who are ready. Yes. Next. The brief summary of what your findings are is that for scenario 8 it would be impossible to implement 7. What is scenario B? Talking about the bigger and more digitally advanced terminals that can be possible. They still said it's a lot of energy and money, but we can do it, and we're also willing to do it. The challenge is the smaller terminals, and for them, some of them do not frequently exchange electronically data, so that they need new capabilities. Some even might need a new TOS system or a system because they only work with Excel and email. So for things like those, it will be more challenge, and therefore our insight is that probably 2027 is even too challenging, and it must be additional investment into how to do it and what the roadmap is and what interoperability challenges can be solved by them in order to get a higher confidence level that it's doable and is also cost effective. Next slide, please. So what are the implications? The good thing is we learned that there's in principle the willingness to share the data, and I also see some benefits in sharing data, but not sharing every data element that exists. And what also clear is the learn because at the moment, and then they can start exchanging. That also means that the roadmap would be helpful to clearly identify the capabilities needed and also to manage the coordination between the to make sure that the resources are efficiently used. And as we also heard, interoperability of the data and the IT platforms for fast adoption is relevant. We need to have the transparent, cost efficient, and also the data. Hopefully this can be standardized between all the different stakeholders, but we're not there yet. The good thing is, if this is done, we would have an efficient end-to-end data exchange in order to make customer more happy and also to be prepared for future digital topics that are in the making, not only the directive, etc. It's probably not a complete list if you look into the future. So that means collaboration is possible, and in order to make the digital supply chain work, and therefore we can have digital capabilities might need maybe something around 5 years. They need to have a TOS installed, and they start learning with the exchanging data. Some of them are in the middle. They are already capable of sharing data, but maybe not everything is perfectly aligned on which data to be shared and with whom. And then the last evolution step would be really to be in a stage where supply chain automation can happen more fully and exception management based on meaningful and reliable data is established, and this would be then the phase where the whole combined transport ecosystem would work together in a data exchange ecosystem that can meet the expectations of everybody. Next slide, please. So we are quite happy with TSI Telematics, but not everything is there. As said, we have the topic with the cost efficiency, supporting the IT infrastructures. So the interoperability of the platform in practice is not where it could be, and also the cost burden is still something that needs to be worked on. And maybe one recommendation is that the collaboration between the terminals and the IMs plus RUs is maybe moderated by somebody neutral to make sure that it's TEN-T terminals, and the small ones might still have some burdens. So that's something to look at if the group can be split, or maybe some exceptions can be defined. Then what was also mentioned, it's not relevant that everybody needs to have the same data and the full scope of the data. So not everybody wants to see where each train moves and wants to have the update and needs to store it. If some have said we don't need any status updates at all, and if the disruption messages are there, then we're happy that we can only exceptionally need the state. Maybe we can still discuss. Topic is public data exchange. Already mentioned. We believe that we're not there yet. To make it mandatory for everybody, it might have adverse effects, which then slows down implementation and acceptance. So we would not share data with everybody. Private everybody gets that, but they get what they need. It also means that platforms to the public, because it might complicate the situation further. Status that somebody from the operations point of view have need initiatives like so easy and then cost efficient interoperability. Can only add
this impact assessment, I think, to ERA, because the agency who finalized the TSI Telematics, we will also then share. We have nothing to hide, so this will be also shared somehow with the other stakeholders, so mainly the rail undertakings and the infrastructure managers. I think to make it clear, I think also that we shouldn't somehow kill or overkill, I think, additional requirements that might be, Roland said, maybe counterproductive. So that's why for us as we are more going to this selective open data, completely publicly or to make it completely open. Yeah. We have to be careful about the timing. So here we have already mentioned several IT platforms that should facilitate the communication between the different stakeholders. So we have invited one of the IT providers, so the company Alpega, so that is represented by Bemden, to make it clear, I think, that railways needs to improve itself in order to meet the requirements of the logistic. So Eric, I will also then open the presentation here. I will just close that one.
Eric.
Coming?
Yes. You can move to the next slide, please, Eric.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Also today, Alpega is and in one of our offerings is the TMS platform, Transport Management System, which is a global multi-mode, multi-leg platform. So we serve, I would say, almost equally, shippers, consignees, etc. And as an IT platform, I think one of the find shippers to gather and centralize data from various sources in a one-to-many model, okay, and to also in the end provide end-to-end visibility if and when and where that is needed. So it's lots of information can be exchanged, limited data, and that in a few seconds, a few minutes. So if you can go it's the one-to-many 25 together with colleagues competitors. At that up, we started the one-to-many model, the one-to-one data exchange anymore. That's what the TMS provides, from network optimization to freight cost management and advanced analytics. A very is the one that's highlighted in red is the shipment. Saying, Eric, that we may not need to or depending from what type of transport. The most important then the shipment can be tracked completely for the clients, the manufacturers, and that is a very important. With the internet, it's we work day in day out. Even B2B has the same expectations as B2C. When you buy something privately on the internet, it's obvious that you will have a tracking. You will be able to see when that parcel will arrive at your home. In B2B now, it's the same. Okay, most of the people expect to have the same experience in B2B than in B2C. If you don't have that full visibility from end to end somewhere, the lack of visibility for ongoing transportation operations will result in delayed or missed deliveries, or which is a big problem for suppliers, because then that can lead to churn eventually as well, and an inability to plan ahead. That planning word is even more important, I think, in combined transport and in intermodal transport. Everything leads to poor customer relations, which is always a burden, not only for the supplier, but even also for the transport operators that are bringing the goods from A to B or from A to C with B in the middle. Can you go to the next one, please? Just showing kind of, I wanted to try to keep it simple, but it's not always simple. We try to keep it. On the left side, you will see ERP, so that's a manufacturer. And I'll share a little bit who are the people in between, what type of data has been exchanged over the last 25 years, because it all started 25 years ago, and it didn't start with full data sets. It started with some data, some relevant data, and then it evolved over time. It started with, you know, the shipment itself, with a shipment identifier, and a plant pickup, plant delivery date maybe, and then it evolved to really, even in some certain modes now, to real-time visibility, if and when needed. But if you start from the left side, you have exchange coming from the ERP of the client, the shipper, going through an IT system like Alpega or other colleagues of Alpega, because Alpega and the colleagues, we enable this one-to-many model. So we push information through to various carriers in various modes on the right side, and they can provide information back either directly, what you see at the bottom, carriers and warehouse and terminal operators into Alpega, yes, thank you, or through other providers that are specialized in certain transport modes or certain flows of data exchange. You will see here, I gave some examples in the ocean shipments. Intra is very well known, a party provider specialized in everything that is around ocean shipments, container shipments. So the shipping lines will push data into Intra to Alpega, and Alpega into the ERP of the client. What we show here is that the TMS is central here and will centralize data coming from several sources. And when I say centralize, it's also do the right mapping so that the client and client and if you look at the all the data with everyone. Everything is selective. Only so that transport or shipment will see the data. No one else. Okay. So this has been available for many, many years for other transport modes, and you can select also which people and which intervenants in for chain can see the data, change data, and what type of data can be mapped from right to left or from left to right. So there's a that is being exchanged, and that can vary from client to their needs. So the data is shared between authorized and relevant stakeholders, and the data can be restricted data, and sometimes only two segments of data can be exchanged. In our discussion today, what is relevant is to, for example, talk about Intra, where we talk also, yeah, a shipment of a container goes through many different actors. We all know that. There's also terminal operators there, like we have terminal operators in combined transport for rail. We've seen the map of showing the vessels where they are. That can be public, but then a specific container doesn't need to be public. All this is possible through integration is not. The difficulty is to find as Peter said earlier, that is what type of data do you. To the next one, please. Thank you. What we see, what we hear from our clients, shippers, manufacturers, is more they use the aspect for several reasons. We'll see that in the next slide, and the last slide. Manufacturers that would love to shift to intermodal transport, but for a few reasons maybe do not do it yet. It was also shown by Roland earlier on, and the lack of visibility on certain, not the full end-to-end visibility, but certain elements is there in combined transport. Predominantly, road and ocean visibility are being actively and heavily used in various verticals. And when I say actively and heavily, most of the shipments of the clients that you see here, examples on the right side, okay, most is event-based tracking statuses, and some of them even for road, for example, real-time visibility. Even on the plain rail wagons and trains, we have integrations with some suppliers for some clients that follow full trains or wagon units, and they can have the real-time visibility there. But the first instance is to try and have event-based statuses available, and not 20 of them, but only a few of them can be very useful. So what we see, what we hear from our clients is that the combined transport visibility is missing that rail component, if we can call it like that. So pre and post carriages, two terminals are available in terms of visibility, but the rail component for manufacturers who lean towards modal shift or have need of combined transport, they miss that specific leg and data set in terms of visibility versus the other modes, which means that there's an important component that they don't have, so that they're not able to plan further ahead for further activities, and they do not they do not have the right information, and they cannot proactively, as they want to do it today, also inform their end customers of potential delays or problems that occur. Also, in terms of data analysis, more and more shippers have nice data sets that can flow into their data lakes, their own data lakes, or use TMS or transport management platforms to do that. But they use data to really measure performance, their own measurements, their own performance, the performance of their suppliers in terms of transport, so that they can improve their operations over time. And if they have missing data, they don't have a complete data set, and they cannot have a complete analysis and KPI. Can you move ahead, please? So what is the value? Okay, so shippers, manufacturers, they gain visibility. They can track their shipments, but what is important is not only the status of the shipment, but it's also the ability to receive notifications from the status. Notifications whenever there's an issue, a problem, because then shippers, manufacturers can work based on management of the exception, and the exception is where they should focus on. If everything goes well and a truck or combi will be delivered in due time, no one needs to know, I would say. But if there's an issue, a delay, then people need to know, and people need to be informed proactively. So the visibility allows for ETA updates, even sometimes with certain technology for geofencing, because you may have a truck or a combined vehicle being only 20 kilometers from the delivery point, but standing idle because of one or the other reason. And if you have geofence, you can get alerted also about that. They can have a control tower view. Okay, they can actively manage delay. They can be proactive internally, but also externally towards the end clients. They can have right measurements and KPIs. they can do proper planning and anticipation. And more we talk about resilience, you know, in nowadays world. If you have the full visibility, you can plan ahead, but you can also anticipate. In the end, if you have the data, you can even predict. So that is very important. Lower cost, I will not talk about that because this is proven by cases that if you have the data at the right moment, in the right way through IT platforms, you will lower your operational cost and you will avoid churn by unsatisfied. It's super important. All your execution data. You have between 20-25 years with road transport, but also maritime transport, combined maritime and road transport. This is quite constant. I think this is just to give you. Maybe you can have web portals that give you, you know, the position, but more importantly, on the right side is giving you the statuses of each shipment. It tells you if there's delay or when it will arrive, who's the provider or the supplier who will deliver. This is very important for planning and to be able to work based on the management based on exception, which is very important for daily operations. So that's it from the Alpega side, trying to share what's happening with other modes and how data sets are being exchanged. It's quite high level, but I think the purpose of today is really to share that we are all as IT platforms, but even more our manufacturers, you know, eager to get also for the combined transport the right statuses back in the systems. Thank you very much for your attendance, and if there are questions, we'll be able to answer them at the end, I think, Eric, right?
Yes, right. Yeah, Eric. Yeah. So thanks for your intervention.
You're welcome.
I'm pleased somehow to hear that you manage, I think, to implement what we call the Rotterdam clause, that you send only the data to the one that is identified in the service, and also that would be maybe part of the roundtable, because should we go on an event-based system, I think, for intermodal, or a real-time visibility system? Because here we have also in the chat, I think, already some comments on that. So that's an interesting, I think. We as UIRR, we are going more on the event-based, I think, system than real-time, but it
depends on the
types
industry
of
you're in
exactly.
and what kind of goods you transport mainly. That's the main criteria, I would say.
Let's see if we, in the round table, I think, for also the other actors. Now we are coming back on maybe a higher level, but it's the policy now. We mentioned now several times TSI Telematics, and how the regulation can somehow support, I think, the different ideas and requirements. So that's why we have invited Yann Seimandi from the Commission, somehow to describe in more details the TSI Telematics that is for the moment on the table. So Yann, please go ahead. And I think you have already shared the screen, so you have already then the possibility to make the presentation. Yeah, Yann.
Many thanks. Good still the morning for everybody. And many thanks to UIRR for having me today to present you the insight applicable to combined transport for TSI that I have actually adapted, trying to answer the question raised this morning, and that would also come afterwards, triggering further discussion, I understand, in the roundtable. Very first short slide to present where we are coming from, with a strong political statement supporting our proposal. First is coming directly from our Transport Commissioner, with a commitment to increase intermodal freight transport and go, generally speaking, toward paperless transport, including in rail, and that's what we will achieve as well with this TSI. Another interesting political statement is coming not from DG Move actually, but from another commissioner, Vice President for Technological Sovereignty, and here this is what triggers the need for open data, public data, and use of innovative solution in Commission House. So also to explain the political backup we have for such a proposal as the little implementing act on TSI Telematics. You know the basis of this discussion. You mentioned TAF TSI. Let's keep in mind that it's subject to the Interop directive, and this new TSI is being renamed to cover not only freight but also passenger aspect as a telematic subsystem for interoperability of data sharing in rail transport, with a possibility to cover the entire scope of the directive in that context. In freight, with also linked to the EFTI regulation. All this to achieve as a current package paperless rail freight transport. Let's deep dive into the topic mentioned today, the TSI, with the first point where I would like to try to answer on the impact on freight terminals, which has been presented by UIRR earlier and Consilis in particular. Here, what is important to have in mind is that the operators or the terminals in scope are first, meaning in scope, meaning subject to obligation in the TSI, are first those who are not excluded from the scope of the directive, and this is in the case of terminals subject to national transposition of the Rail Interop directive. So this is a matter for each terminal to identify in the national legislation transposing in national law the Rail Interop directive, either this or this part of the network has been excluded from the directive, and therefore if the network of a terminal is excluded from the scope of the directive. And second step, for those terminals which are not excluded from the scope of the directive, we limit even more the obligation on terminals in the TSI by referring only to those terminals subject to the TEN-T network. So here, basically, we put or set out obligation in the TSI only on big players subject to TEN-T, but mostly also those subject to the directive as well. For other terminals, meaning the obligation laid down in the TSI are not applicable as obligation, but basically are laid down to trigger the attention and the to trigger business needs and basically to lead to incentivize those terminals to apply the TSI, but in that case voluntarily. In any case, for all terminals, not only those in scope, as soon as a project is there to comply with the EU framework, there is financial support at EU level, which is possible. Projects have to be successful, but basically, as I am in scope or not for a terminal, does not limit the financial support that the union can bring for the implementation of EU framework. And that's the last point, is that thing very important in the light of previous presentations. The next point is about the Rotterdam clause, just to confirm that the Rotterdam clause has been transposed in the so-called now Article 4 of the proposed TSI, setting out that obligation and right, so obligation to share data and right to access data are subject to legal provision or contractual agreement or operational responsibility, meaning indirect contractual agreement, meaning that if I have an obligation, a contract with as actor A, I have a contract with actor B. If the actor B has a contract with actor C, then the actor C is also entitled to receive the data directly from A or to access it from a relevant platform of actor A. And this is this concept of operational responsibility. As soon as you are involved in a process, then this involvement trigger a right for you to access the data, and the processes in scope are those defined in the TSI, of course. Aspects which are also important in terms of enforcement is relation to the fees and charges related to the accessibility or the access to the business-to-business data in scope of the TSI. So the TSI is a union act, therefore it falls under the horizontal rules set up in the Chapter 3 of the Data Act and corresponding enforcement mechanism in Chapter 9 of the Data Act, for which there is competent authority for enforcement appointed. Therefore, all the principles of the Data Act laid down in Chapter 3 and 4 are applicable, and the enforcement rules which are set out in the Chapter 9 of the Data Act are also applicable in relation to the TSI. A hint on access to basically the authority and institution for and governments in general for business-to-business data. So the Data Act is basically setting out that when there is an urgent need, which was initially meant in the context of COVID, actually. So in case of crisis, basically as a sanitary or military crisis, the governments already have a possibility to request access to business-to-business data. This is the Data Act. What we are stating in the TSI is that for enforcement and statistical purposes, for specific purposes, which are listed on the screen, so basically enforcement and statistical purposes, it is possible for governments, authority, institution to require businesses access to their data. The access is to raw data, meaning that if there is a need for further data aggregation, this would be additional services, for example, for European statistics, which are already described and framed in the context of Eurostat regulation, for which I put an indication as a footnote on the bottom of that slide. Most interesting topic with the next slide, which is the topic of open data sharing and public data sharing. First 2 slides or 3 slides with some background before to show you a slide you already know from previous UIRR conferences about our proposal. First, when we talk about opening data, the first thing is that when we put data available on platforms, there is a need to make sure that those who access that data have clear access conditions for reuse of that data. Therefore, a basic principle is to use to license the data which are made available via platform. And here in the TSI, this is what we were proposing: standard condition for reuse to protect the data holder for misuse of the data made available via platforms. As part of EU framework already, there is a recommended use of Creative Commons licenses. Therefore, the proposal of that TSI is to reuse this framework or any equivalent open license, meaning that the use of Creative Commons licenses is not made mandatory by this TSI. It is recommended, as any other equivalent open license can be used, as laid down in the text. The second principle is linked to the first one, actually, or the second principle is triggering the next one. Perhaps the architecture of that slide was not the best, but the first principle was basically to go from peer-to-peer to platform data sharing to simplify the data workflow, and to allow that there is a need for access condition for reuse, I just mentioned. The second element is that data to platform should focus on the data which is essential for effectiveness and efficiency of operations. The best place to explain that are, of course, those using that data and those who need that data. And this is what is described. Sorry, I have an issue on the screen. Yes, okay. This is what is described as the data required to be made available in the text. Not all data are required to be made available in relation to the the platform we are referring to, but only specific data. Therefore, other data not listed as to be made available via platform are not required and would remain to be exchanged peer-to-peer. Of course, in freight transport, there is a need for access restriction when it comes to data availability via platform, but also public data. The first is a restriction personal protected. And here we identify that some transport operator may require that their identifier is hidden, meaning that the transport-related information are anonymous. So that's already a first case. The second case, which is rather commercial aspect, is that the identification of the good transported should be excluded. And this is something that trigger the need for specific restriction in the context of public access to data. I will come to that in a minute. Other aspect for security measures, there is, in the case of transport of dangerous goods, a need to restrict access from the public. And for transport for armed forces or other security measures adopted by member state, there is a need to stick to peer-to-peer data sharing to enhance the security of that data sharing. Of course, does not prevent those purposes to or those transport to opt-in to the platform data sharing, but by default they should be excluded. When those restrictions are not applicable, meaning that where a specific element is not subject to any restriction, then there is nothing that would prevent corresponding data to be public, meaning that only data not subject to identified restriction would therefore need to be public. Then the next question is for what purpose, which is repeated again and again. Then please read the recital of our proposal. But basically, there is three elements. The first point, which was, I think, visible in the first presentation, is that there is a need not only to make nice declaration as a Rotterdam declaration, but also to apply it. And therefore, when we put such thing in the legislation, as we are doing now, as we did in previous staff TSI, there is a need to make sure it is enforced. The return of experience from the last years, or almost a decade, since the Rotterdam clause was introduced in TAF TSI, is that there is difficulty for the sector to stick to its own declaration and to enforce it. Therefore, a mean to enforce it when it's not applied, although it is already mandatory, is to when focusing on essential data for operations, to mandate some data to be public. If it's public, therefore, it does not have to be shared bilaterally as a Rotterdam clause. It is accessible to anyone who needs that. The data at stake is with all restrictions I mentioned before, which are anonymity, that the transport operator can be anonymous, that the identification of the good transported should be excluded from public availability, that transport of dangerous goods should be restricted from the public, and so on. With all those restrictions in mind, train traffic could be made public, and specific data as part of train composition could be made public as well. This is the identification and the position of vehicle and their intermodal loading units. The second justification is that public data would basically leverage the attractivity and the reliability of the rail services, as today the lack of transparency in the rail sector in terms of data hinders potential customer from making informed decision. The lack of awareness of availability of rail services basically hinder potential customer to opt in for rail. And the second aspect related to the reliability of rail services is that the lack of ETA data triggers kind of mistrust of customers not being aware when and where their transport will be or are in real time. The second aspect, and which is, as you saw in the second political statement I mentioned, very important, is to foster innovation, not only in transport, but also in rail. And one of the use case for that is, of course, 𝗂𝗄𝗃. Almost done. And here I would like to focus on what is the proposal for the TSI. So this is an extract, you know, by now, of illustrating the content of Article 5. As I mentioned, there is cases where peer-to-peer data exchange may not be necessary in the future. This is the case for train traffic messages that would be made public. In that case, don't need would be made public, but most importantly available via platform, independently of is it public or not. So as soon as train traffic messages are available via platforms, then they are not mandatory to exchange peer-to-peer. That's the first bullet point. The second one is that train composition would remain mandatory as peer-to-peer in the sense that our use shall continue to send it to IAMS, and then from there the platform concept would apply, with IAMS making that data available via platforms for reuse with any other entitled stakeholders. Then comes the obligation for public availability and free of charge access. This is through platforms which shall be publicly accessible. One of them, and the best candidate identified today, is RNETIS. Of course, there is a need for access condition to be defined, as I explained earlier, to protect the data holder from the misuse of the data. And the data identified as part of the obligation for platform data sharing are basically the allocated path, the train traffic based on train traffic message, train running, train forecast information, and as part of train composition received from our use, only the information related to the identification and position of vehicles and their containers, basically. As part of this, there is also the historical record of all that information that would be required to be made public. I mentioned access restriction. So in practice, this would mean that dangerous goods shall not be public, and that transport for armed forces or subject to other security measures would be peer-to-peer only. That's the first restriction. A second restriction is that the identification of the railway undertaking shall not be public upon request of that railway undertaking. All that to say, and that's perhaps the most important part of that presentation, that data related to the goods transported or loaded on wagon are not required to be made public, and therefore with that we clear the commercial sensitivity of the data required to be made public. So here are combined two obligations. One obligation is to move forward or toward platform data sharing versus today only peer-to-peer data sharing, and this is already an important step forward. The second step forward is that data that is essential for operation but also of interest for the public should be made public with all necessary restrictions, and this is what we are describing in the TSI, in particular that Article 5. With that, I hand over to Eric, and many thanks for your patience and listening to me today.
Thanks, Yann. I think also to meet the deadline and the timing. So it's a complex text, I think. I must say that I had to read it several times, I think, to understand all the implications and consequences, I think, for our sector. And I think it's the case, I think, for all the other stakeholders. I say, you know, I think the discussion that we had with you, I think, on the different aspects for intermodal transport. It's good to hear, I think, that the Rotterdam clause, I think, is really, I think, in the heart of your consideration. I think it's also in the heart of the consideration of our operators. So we have to continue in this direction. You mentioned the reasons why you want to, somehow I personally understand, I think, the vision of the Commission to make it publicly, because we are really struggling, I think, to get the data. But for some reason, I think we have to be careful before we are putting all the data on the publicly available, I think, platform. So that's something that we have also then to address here. Okay, so after the policy aspects, now we are going into another direction. So we had IT providers, I think, for the logistics. Now we are going a bit further, I think, on the right of the stakeholders. We are going now more into the community platforms for ports and also then for intermodal transport. So we have invited the Port of Rotterdam, the Port of Hamburg, and also the 𝗥𝗂𝗃𝗃 to make small statements on their needs, requirements, and maybe obstacles, I think, in sharing the data. So I will ask here the Port of Rotterdam, so it was Celeste and Demi, I think, to report, I think, on the current, I think, challenges that are that the Port of Rotterdam is confronted with them. So I'm just looking in the here if Celeste is there or Demi.
Yes, I'm here.
I'm here.
Okay, great to hear. Sorry, because I have.
We are a facilitator to bring the market together with the various market parties that are involved in our project, and 𝗶𝗵𝗵𝗵 as an IT platform. Within the Port of Rotterdam, we have 5 big deep sea share in our project, and if you also look at the trains that drive, we have 32,000 trains annually, which is basically 1.2 million containers. With this project, we're mainly focusing on containers, but we're also looking into other modes of other community goods, as in bulk. That will be on the roadmap for later. If you could move to the I have this slide. This is the project. So we're sharing real-related data, and with the real growth program, it's called Real Connected. We aim to improve this transparency, efficiency, and resilience in the rail freight transport in the port. So, we do this by enhancing collaboration and optimizing resource use, improving the predictability of rail transport, and therefore mostly with the focus on our customers, the customer value and cost effectiveness. Together with 26 market parties here in Rotterdam, we aim to try to set the digital basics in order so that we can all share data amongst each other and try to improve the efficiency here in the port. So I would like to give the word over to Demi, if she's gonna explain more about the data sharing from an IT perspective.
Yes. So my name is Ďemi Hoddeman. I work as a product owner at Portbase, and I specifically focus on the hinterland transportation done by rail and barges. So we are currently heavily involved in the Rail Connected project, where we built the IT infrastructure for the rail sector in Rotterdam. Basically, what we have done is we have with the relevant parties that are also connected to a certain train, to a certain loading. So we do that in a way where the person that shares the data with us will also always remain the owner of the data, so they get to say the final call on if it's shared or not. But what we basically are is a data hub for the Rotterdam port. This is also where the data sharing for the rail transport comes in, because in order to optimize the rail sector, we need to be able to understand and receive the data and share this with all the users. So we are also opting for sharing the data through our platform to the other relevant parties. We only share it with the parties that are actually involved in that data. So we will never share information about a certain train with a terminal that the train is not going to. We will only share it with the terminal that it actually will go to. We are working with a lot of variety in parties. We have large terminals to really small operators. So in order to get this program growing, we need to have clarity on the compensation and also be able to divide this over the parties that we work with. So for a large terminal, a certain amount per train cannot be, would not be too much, but we also work with one-person carriers that have to pay the same amount. So this clarity we are currently missing. And as we are working with in Rotterdam, we have a lot of trains that are coming from the hinterland, and it's really hard for us currently to identify a train that is in the Netherlands from what country they came from, as the train numbers are varying throughout the whole hinterland. So in order to optimize the rail sector through data, we need a way to identify the trains throughout the whole hinterland. If you can go to the next slide, Celeste. So Portbase is built on sharing data for not only the rail and barge sector, but we do this for larger vessels. We do this for road. We do this for everything regarding port logistics. And what we have noticed in the past 23 years that we have been operational is that data is really the base layer for technological developments. What we see now is that in the rail sector, we are missing certain data that is actually quite normal to have in other parts of the port logistics sector. We are working on process optimizations, but we need to work closely together with various parties in order to combine our insights to get this process optimized, which we are currently now having a hard time with. And what we are trying to do together with the Port of Rotterdam is that we visualize the chain. We visualize the full route from A to B and back to C. But we cannot do this by ourselves. We need to combine all the data that in one of the earlier statements, we are sharing sensitive data about what is in the container, but we are really talking about ETAs, ETDs, those types of information. It's all about times and the timestamps. Like really shortly, our statement on data sharing. In case there are any questions, you can definitely reach out to Celeste or me, and we are more than willing to answer those.
So thanks, Celeste, and
thank you
for your statement. I think so. That's the vision. I think systems that need data. So the statement that can also do the same thing. And then just sharing my screen again.
So the my major not to repeat over and over, same here, like the colleagues from Rotterdam Port said already. I do represent the Hamburg Port Authority. The Hamburg Port Authority is a sort of basically our historic core, but in this special a special feature as railway service facilitator, as a traffic source or sink for mainline infrastructure. Yes, we also work on it because it has become clear for the Port of Hamburg since decades, actually 30 years ago, that in rail freight transportation everything is interlinked with everything else, and that means that we have history and we continue work closely with operators. So in order to get that done, we do on the infrastructure within the port area. We do the traffic management. We have been operating a rail port community system because this is something like port base in Hamburg. We call it now Transport Rail, but it has been an incarnation of course infrastructure management. The IT platform we are operating on behalf of the port community is Transport Rail, and the volume is, I may say, significant. We operate in the network of the Port of Hamburg 300 kilometers of track work. We interconnect 80 maritime terminals with rail access, and that means overall 75,000 inbound and outbound trains handled per year. In rail freight volume, that's about 45 million tons. In TEU, that's about 2.5 million tons. Thank you. Eric, could you switch to the other slide deck, please?
I have an issue because the second slide is not what you are expecting, so I have to
Eric,
find out.
I send you via email the integrated.
Okay,
version.
so okay, we'll try then to
maybe you
open
can
it.
use this one.
Yep, that was my mistake. Yeah. Because I have a presentation with 8 slides, but that's something else. This is what you have sent it out or not? Because
yes. I speed up. Just use that one, and we skip those slides which are not needed now for this chapter.
I'm coming. Sorry, because I have to play with the different screens here. Now you should be there. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Next slide, please. And
this is done.
One further.
Yep.
So this is to illustrate that the situation we are facing as the traffic source or sink for rail freight transportation. Everything denoted in dark blue here is the yards from the Hamburg Port Authority, and we do not have in the larger ports, and Hamburg is typical example of many larger seaports. We do not have like a shunting yard outside the ports, and then just shunting consists being moved inside the port. A larger and complex service facility, they will usually have the mainline trains entering the port and then being distributed inside the port. Distributed means in this case switching whole trains or groups of wagons from the dark blue facilities, track work facilities, into the green facilities, which represent more or less the maritime terminals with rail access, 80 overall. Challenge is here that we have to manage train operations, wagon movements, freight movements from about 165 railway undertakings, and we are legally obliged to be neutral. We are legally obliged to be non-discriminatory, and actually we are quite happy about that, because this competition means a lot of hinterland connections, and this means a lot of options for switching freight from road to rail traffic. So just one slide further, please. It means, however, if we operate such a high volume of traffic in such a compact area, geographical area, that means that a lot of information exchange is being necessary and is being carried out between the different roles. As said before, we have been operating since decades a rail really to solution. We have started decades ago by community system, which is fed by the data from the different depends on states in rail traffic, and will then combine the data and tailor the feed different organizations. And therefore, my plea here is that in short, the Rotterdam Declaration, slightly more elaborative, to have data available, freely available to all stakeholders in a transport. I must say we have some reservations about public data for security issues, and these security issues, they go a bit beyond dangerous goods and military transports, because we operate in the seaport environment. We operate very compact facilities with typically high traffic density, and open access to information makes the infrastructure vulnerable, and in case of obstructions will affect, of course, a lot of rail freight transportation. That's why we ask for selective open sharing of data. Yes, data sharing, but restricted to those involved in a particular transport. That would be in brief my presentation. We, as said before, we consider ourselves an entity, a neutral entity devoted to encourage shift to rail. We have been doing this since several decades, and that should conclude my contribution. I hope it was not overly excessive.
No, thanks, Wolf. No, it was perfect, I think, because you explained, I think, in parallel to the port of Rotterdam, I think what you have developed, I think, so far, and you have also here taking your position about the availability of public data, and also that your approach is also then a bit in line with UIRR to go more into the selective open data sharing, that what we have heard, I think, by the different platform providers. But I think we have the last speaker, so it's 𝗂𝗐𝗍𝗄𝗎, so Managing Director of 𝗥𝗚𝗊𝗂𝗏. So he will then mention, I think, the data hub 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗏 4.0, and also I think which kind of problems he's facing. Yeah. Okay, Aldo.
Okay, do you see my screen?
I see your screen, yeah, perfectly. Yeah,
okay,
thanks.
perfect. So good morning to everyone. My name is 𝗂𝗿𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗃 and I am one of the two managing director of TSI Intermodal. We are a private company and we are managing a data hub which enable the data exchange in the intermodal sector between logistics service provider, terminal, railway undertaking, and intermodal operators. So we started 2 years ago our operations, and our objective is to simplify the way with the one-to-many before. The way we give you a short intro. So we have, say, our data hub, and we cover mainly the rail and the first mile, last mile of the intermodal traffic. Actors involved are the logistics service provider, combined transport terminal operator, and RU. And we basically support all the different events which are in the intermodal process, as we'll explain later. We are oriented in which is the main language we use to communicate with the different partners of the supply chain, and we also support 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗃. So, for example, let's say our objective is to be able to cover all the different events which are requested in the intermodal data exchange, and at the same time to be compliant with the standard. That's why we are let's say collaborating in different innovation projects and also listening into the market, because today, obviously, as I will briefly summarize later, the objective is to have and support fully the intermodal visibility, so to give the supply chain visibility to all the customers and to provide the data on time and when needed, but at the same time also understand what are the new, let's say, features and new requirements which are coming from the market and from our customers. Customer base, we are now having a customer base a little bit above 30. We cover between 60,000 and 100,000 train. And let's say up to now we have exchanged around 40 million messages in the last 18 months. These volumes are and very important. Okay, I want to highlight because at the same time I am also head of IT at 𝗂𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃, and so we as a TSI, we are not a software company, but we are a solution company with the objective of standardizing and obviously open to everyone, okay, with the proper level of security. Before presenting what are the requirements from our perspective about the data exchange and also for our customer for the future, just want to quickly introduce you for a couple of slides of what the data hub is doing. So data hub, as I say, is a central place which allow this exchange of data in the one-to-many approach. Normally we are supporting, for example, the timetable, the digital timetable from the intermodal operator, the bookings, all the track and trace event in the terminal, and then also the estimated time of arrival and estimated time of pickup. So the objective is to cover and with the time extend all the main event by using the 𝗍𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃 and also the 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃 standard. The main process we follow and we support is the one that I'm showing here. So the intermodal process, let's say considering also the first mile and the last mile, where as mentioned before, we consider the booking, all the gate in, train loading, departure, estimate time of arrival, estimate time of pickup, the arrival at destination, and the final pickup and the gate out. So these are the main events that we cover. Now, coming to the core question of today, what are the expectations for the future and what are the customer requirements? So let's say the expectation for the future, according to our experience in the market, is standardization. So what we need to work even more than today is to, first of all, to push and implement even more the technical standard that we have in place, like TSI and 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏. So we have now a good base, but the implementation should be pushed even further. And then what we see in the market is that we need to go a step ahead, where we have also to try to standardize our process in the market. So like it was mentioned before by Devos, we are working with the 𝗥𝗿𝗵𝗵𝗁 in defining some guidelines in order to have simplified rule where we are going to standardize our process, because we believe that standardization and simplification help also to simplify the way we work, but also to increase the attractiveness of our sector. Then, okay, this means also to have better interoperability. So today, okay, we are in a good way, but sometimes we still have some silos, especially where we are for example, having complexities on integrating certain partners, or we see it also as a 𝗥𝗂𝗃𝗀𝗃 to integrate with other platforms, because today, okay, the objective is also to be able to put all the platforms and solutions we have in place in communication, and so to even expand it to have a kind of orchestration between different platforms which are available. Then, according to clear rule and proper level of security, to have also the open data approach. So, for example, certain data about the infrastructure, about the current congestion of the rail network, and so on, could be eventually evaluated and provided as open data to everyone, because is maybe not a fair example, but it's normally mentioned when you want to go from one place to another with the car and so on. You open Google Maps and you see the current traffic and you understand the situation. In the rail market, unfortunately, we cannot do that for many different reasons. Okay, it's maybe a how to say, but with the proper level of authorization and security, maybe this open data in the infrastructure and traffic situation in the rail can be provided. Last but not least, we believe that increasing standardization, simplification, data sharing, and open data will help for different companies working in the market to use and to have innovative technologies like AI, for example, which, as we all know, we need to have a huge amount of data, and maybe with the AI, the different players in the market can have a better planning, for example, or can better react to disruption and use predictive insight. Instead, other points from our customers. So obviously, our customers are asking more and more to have a better quality of the data that we provide, especially in the forecast. So when we speak, for example, in data models, or to have an accurate estimate time of pickup, because they want to know when the train arrives at destination, but also when the unit is going to be ready to be picked up by them. And we all know that sometimes the train arrival doesn't mean that the unit can be picked up. Okay, so these are also for the tracking tracer or the timetable and so on. We increase frequency. Not to have increase the amount of data, because maybe the customer is for example, in case of an event that the forecast of destination for the estimate time of pickup is always updated, that there is, for example, a timetable always updated with the latest cancellation and delay and so on. So to have a proper etc. And then what is also important is to work on a new area where we can the proactive notification. So we know that the quality today is a topic because we have we need to provide to the market and to the customers and all the players all the relevant data and to be able to be proactive also. Last but not least, okay, security, because we know that security, cyber security and so on is also a very important topic together with all the regulation about data privacy and governance. So these are the main elements that you know we collected and we have also in our mind. I don't know if there is any question, Eric, or from some of the partners.
It would be great, I think, but due to time restriction, I think it would be difficult, I think, to go into a detailed roundtable. So I have now a challenge to make it more a square table than round. So we have some minutes left, I think. So I would propose, I think, that all speakers make maybe a last comment or statements if needed. But I would like maybe to start with Shamshula. Service provider, maybe there's coming from the audience that we are speaking about predictive platforms. Can you somehow maybe state that your predictive elements that you are producing and that you are proposing to your customers is of high or is high enough in terms of accuracy that they can really use it? So, but of course you can make any statement that you want, Serge.
Yeah, because of the time we are already over, I will really try to be very short. But consider that I will not speak on behalf of my employer, Transporion and Trimble, but also coming here to this webinar as Vice Chair of Alice, and you kindly refill this paper. What we have been hearing over the last almost 2 hours or 2 what we have stated, and in particular also the last claimed that might just Peter is much too nice. I'm more blunt than Peter. Because this rail-centric view, which if we maintain it, it doesn't take us anywhere. It hasn't taken us anywhere over the last 30 years, and I'm not criticizing that because I wouldn't support intermodal transport. I do that. This is why I criticize it, because I'm getting tired to see intermodal transport turning in circles. So coming to the last statement from TXI. Yes, my employer is a logistics platform. We are proud member of the UIRR since a couple of years. Do you think I could get any data forward to the shippers using our since 2 years? The answer is no, because it was made such a burden. If I talk to, I was not talking to either who was here, but to a colleague. Our customers are and logistics service providers, and we transport by transport, and then everything starts to be complicated. So we really make it complicated, and the point is really this customer's view. Why intermodal transport for many shippers is still toxic today. Toxic. And this is a showstopper, and we want to remove this showstopper. The reason why it's toxic is because on one hand you have this complexity, which is undoubted, and on the other hand you have a transparency, which is much worse than in any other transport mode I know. Now, the transparency in road transport is better, but not that much better. The difference is in transport, you have maybe one subcontractor, then you have maybe in total 2 or 3 parties involved. In intermodal transports, you easily have 12 parties or more involved. And this is, of course, bringing some complexity to the table. And the point is, it's not to be able to bring that data forward to the shipper, because the shipper is the one who could push for modal shift. And in a survey we did together with Consilis Logistics University 1 year ago, it was shown that the shippers are ready, but the toxic situation needs to be improved and removed. And yeah, so very clearly in any other transport mode we know today, either the complexity is lower or the transparency is higher, or both together than in intermodal transport. And this is something we need to focus on. So the data exchange, as also my colleague from Alpega said, and a couple of other people said, is not the topic. It's not a technology problem. Also in transport, we are used to share data among the actors of the supply chain, shipment per shipment. Of course, a shipper wouldn't see any other data than where his shipment is on, and so does a logistics service provider and any other party. Final point, I'm going there. You asked on the prediction, and we had the discussion: is ETA, expected time of arrival, for pickup and for loading, isn't that enough? Now, no, it's not enough. Why? Because, and you are right, predicting a really high quality expected time of arrival is already for many people a challenge on road transport. It's a much higher challenge on road transport. So that's not one simple objective ETA. You will have to have complete data and give a better ETA. Others, or no ETA. But to get there, and yes, we had a discussion before this meeting, do we need to have real-time visibility? I would say it is not realistic to make it compulsory to have real-time visibility on rail. It would still be better. And why? Because we know also from other transport modes like ocean transport that you get a lot of data, and some of that data is of really scrappy quality, and a lot of data is contradicting itself. Gate in, gate out. We can agree that gate out in the same gate shouldn't be earlier than gate in, but all this happens. So you need a lot of data. You need the raw data. You don't need every data, as it has been said before. Real-time visibility is not complete rocket science, also not for rail. Rail Cargo Group and Transport have gained the Supply Chain Excellence Award last year because we have been demonstrating that it is possible, it's feasible, it is there. And my last point is, I see that DG Move is looking into the right direction already, if I hear the statement from the colleague from before, but I would really support certain level of data sharing, including the shipper, needs to be enforced. And it would be nice if it was supported by real-time data, but where we don't have real-time data, of course, we can live and cleanse also data coming from status events which are entered by human beings, not always in time, not always in good quality, but that's what we have. Thank you.
So we need a strong medicine. So let's for solving the issue. But don't forget, I think, because the colleague with whom you were speaking at 𝗏𝗏𝗏, indeed, we are providing the data to the LSPs and the freight forwarders, but we don't know exactly what they are doing with the data. their transparency towards the shippers. Then we don't understand. Aldo, you want maybe to react directly?
No, but I fully agree with what Serge say. I mean, at the end of the day, we need standardization, but we need to keep into consideration that sometimes in the whole chain there are interdependencies, and for example, the platform itself can be Trimble, can be TSI, can be any platform itself, is not deciding alone the security level to be applied, or what are the contractual let's say relation between the different players. What is important is that sometimes these let's say toxic, as you mentioned before, is even related to the fact that there is a very rule, and maybe this rule more than today who can do what. But I have to say that either we have areas where we can have open data, and I believe that we have open data areas that we can work with, but we have other areas where data have to be provided, as you mentioned before in the Rotterdam clauses. If you are involved in the transport and we are able to identify, as Ralf-Charley Schultze mentioned before, of course it can be done. Otherwise, I don't believe that we can have open data for everything. So you know, normally I am an open source guy, but we need to have some rule, you know.
Absolutely. That's fine. And I'm happy to take that point up and discuss it outside this webinar, because I understand that we are coming.
It's a starting point here, session, and also what we are focusing is really the TSI Telematics. So again, I think for Yann for presenting the TSI Telematics. We are waiting for a new version. Maybe you can say something on that, Yann, when the new version will be ready. I think that all the stakeholders can have a view. Again, I think on this new version before the risk committee. I think we will certainly vote at end of June.
Yeah. Indeed, the risk committee has actually been of interpreters, but in any case, the risk is now scheduled on the 2nd and 3rd of July. The rule of procedure of that committee requires document to be available 1 month in advance, which basically lead to the availability of the document by the 2nd of June, which is a Monday. So that's, of course, what we commit to respect the rule of procedure of that committee. Therefore, member state can expect document on the 2nd of June. The platform where we upload document is also accessible to representative bodies.
Indeed,
therefore, we also expect UIRR and other organizations to disseminate those documents throughout the sector.
Indeed. Okay. Thanks for the information. That's an important point, and that's just before the Munich fair. So we have some also then issues, I think, on digitalization. Maybe Peter, you mentioned this best practice guidelines that you are developing with you, so ECTA, Alpha, and UIRR. Maybe you can say some words about that, about the planning that everybody is also aware when these documents will be available.
Yeah, so well, as said, we are indeed joining forces on that topic together also with 𝗏𝗏. The plan is that the first guideline will be ready by let's say end of June, so before summer. And yeah, I think from there we will definitely do more communications after summer. Yeah, I think so. I would say let's target for after summer, and definitely will be also organizing some webinars there, Erik, to further communicate on the work that has been done, because it's really a bottom-up approach where we try to bring the stakeholders together and do it in a correct way. And so I don't want to, so I wasn't, but I think we need to collaborate. Working together in a toxic environment doesn't work for me. So I think it's more looking at actions and see where we find solutions. So I hope we get there, Erik, I would say after summer with the first guidelines. And that's really a team of more than 20. So there are 3 work groups, more than 20 experts putting, I would say, the brands together. And for me, that's really very, very nice. I think it's a bottom-up B2B approach where we have to do and to open the path. And so I'm very pleased to see that. I also see the passion within the teams from the different stakeholders. So for me, that's encourages that there is a future for intermodal, and we just need to make it happen together.
Mm-hmm. And digital is part of that. Yeah. Okay. Many thanks, I think, for all the intervention, for the speakers. I think because even there is somebody who would like to raise. Maybe I will take the last really question, but really from the audience, I see the raised hand from. Sorry for now. The microphone for you, and then and also the camera, and then you can raise your question. Yeah. So please, Mr. or Mrs. Lengel, if you want to. Do you hear us? I think you are muted because I allow the microphone, but you are muted. You are muted. This I cannot.
Yeah, put the question in the chat.
Now it disappears. Okay. Okay. But many thanks then for the speaker and intervention. We will compile, of course, as usual, I think, after the webinar, all the presentations. So you all the audience will be then having an access LinkedIn post, I think, to summarize, I think, the main outputs of the webinar. Yeah. So many thanks. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Ciao.